Game over. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 640 for June 8th, 2025, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, for this week's show. I'm very, very excited to dig into this week's topic. If you joined us last week on the show, you'll know that we are ramping up to an episode where we're going to do best movies of the decade so far.
Indeed.
And we have a really, really fun special guest in store. For that, I cannot wait for that episode. However, we had a couple of other episodes we wanted to use as an appetizer. Last week, we did best performances of the decade so far. That was a really fun conversation. And this week, it is a little JD Brendan special.
Oh, yeah, this is for us. This is strictly for us.
We're going to be talking about our top 5 scores, film scores of the decade so far. And look, we somewhat joke about this being for Brendan and I, but if my prompt tweet earlier today is any indication, it isn't just for Brendan and I. A lot of people are interested in this topic.
People like this topic. Yeah, I don't think we've done anything like this as it relates to, like decade or even year celebrations like this outside of our annual award shows, right? Whenever we do, let's say, our retrospectives every year, or we do some type of decade-like celebration, it's usually, okay, what are the best scenes of the decade? What are the best performances of the decade?
Yeah.
We did performances last week, and we decided to pivot a little bit and let's do scores. Let's do film scores. We haven't really done something like this.
Exactly. I mean, to your point, it makes sense that we would do scenes of the decade. And trust me, I would love to have that conversation, but it would be revealing of my top 10 when we get to best of the decade so far.
Same here. Yeah.
So this is a fun little pivot. And also, look, I'm a film score junkie.
This is how we sell shirts. This is called
YouTube.
This is called self-promotion right there.
Exactly. If you're listening to the podcast, I am wearing our Film Score Junkie t-shirt that you can buy on our store, the InSession Film store, InSessionFilm.com/store. Go check it out.
Yep. Great design by JD Duran as well. So really great stuff, man.
Thank you. I came fully prepared. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, I do apologize for my very red face. I was outdoors a lot over this last weekend. So many of you might know, I've talked about this a lot on the show, that I'm also a sports nerd as well as being a film nerd. But the one sport that I never really participated in was swimming. I grew up in Michigan. Swimming isn't the hot topic in Michigan.
I mean, what they have
cold half of the year.
They have ice fishing. They don't have ice swimming. Is that not a thing?
No, we don't really like swimming's not a, and it's ironic because swimming and diving at the University of Michigan is actually like one of the best in the world.
It's actually huge. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, like Michael Phelps comes from that program.
That's
true. It is prestigious, but the state as on the whole, it's ice cold 6 months out of the year. And even when you get to the warmer months, the lakes don't really warm up until August. So it's nothing that I really grew up around. Down here in South Florida, it's much more of a thing.
Sure.
And my son, Sam, is big into swimming right now. He's been doing it for about 7 or 8 months. He really loves it. He's getting really, really good at it. And he has these meets about once a month. Yeah. And these little smaller meets that we try to take him to get experience. They're more like practice meets, essentially. So he does that a couple of times a month as well. In Florida, swimming pools are not indoors. There's no need.
that
Apparently.
makes sense. That makes sense.
There's no need. It is all outdoors because it is warm all the time. You can swim all year round.
It is
The
the
one
anti-Michigan.
Yeah, well, and that's what's interesting. So, like, it does explain my very red face because we were at the meet Saturday morning through the afternoon. We were outside a lot. And because it's all outdoors, you know, you're standing outdoors, you're sweltering in the heat. It's a miracle that no one dies. You know, you got that really hot Florida sun just belting on you
Yeah,
for hours at a time.
I think I'd struggle as well.
It is a challenge, but Sam has a lot of fun. It's great. You know, it's ultimately a good time. What's really interesting, and this is naive of me to say because, again, I'm not in that world all the time, especially back home. I had never seen this before because growing up in Michigan, again, the lakes don't get really warm until August. You get about 1 month, a few weeks of warm lake water, and then you get into the fall and it all cools down again.
It all cools down, yeah.
So a lot of the pools back home, of course, all of them back in Michigan are indoors, and they're typically heated to some degree or another throughout the year. Because again, it is ice cold 6 months of the year. So if you're going to go to your local YMCA in January, that pool is heated. What I had never experienced before is that when we took Sam to this meet on Saturday, they had water coolers. They had essentially fire hoses blasting cool water into the pool to cool it down because it was so goddamn hot that the pool water was too warm for the kids to have the meet in.
Was the water boiling? It might as well have been, I guess, at this point. As close as it ever could
It's real
become.
warm. Like my in-laws who have their own pool in their backyard, we might have to implement this because it is already at a point where their pool is essentially bath water.
It's basically a
you
sauna.
get in and it's real warm. Yeah. You don't cool
Hey, at
down
least you don't
all.
have to invest in a hot tub. Nature does
That's
it
true.
for you.
I mean, it's one giant hot tub. That's kind of what it becomes. So I guess I could kind of relate in that fashion, but I had never seen that before. They had these giant jets of cool water just blasting into the pool to cool it down because it was
I mean, it
so
makes sense.
hot.
It makes sense.
Crazy.
Hey, as long as they're doing their job to keep these kids healthy and safe who are swimming, and based on what you've been posting on Facebook, it seems like Sam is really.
Oh, he's having a great
this.
time. He's having a good time. No, it's a lot of fun.
Is
Anyway,
this his sport
real
of choice? Is this his sport of choice
so
now?
far? He does want to do flag football again in the fall.
Yeah, because
So
I remember
think
you
he's going
mentioned
to
he
do
was
that.
doing flag football for quite some time as well.
I think he's going to do that again, but he's really getting good at the swimming. So I
Okay.
think that one is going to stick for a while.
Cool.
At any rate, that explains the red face. If for those watching on YouTube, very excited to
I don't know.
dig into.
Maybe my ring light above me is just giving my computer screen a different glare or something like that. But I don't. Okay, from that angle, it does look a little red. But for when you're looking straight
promise you.
ahead, there's a bit of a tan to it as well. So you got
I
a little bit of a
promise
mix
you,
going.
I would never do this because no one wants to ever see it. But if I was to take off my shirt, you would like the tan from my face and arms to the very white chest that I have.
It's just noticeable.
It is extremely noticeable. Yeah, it's not good.
I once had something like that happen last time I went on vacation in August. So this past August, my wife's family and I went to North Carolina, as we always do, and there's a clear smear on my chest where the sunburn got me, and I clearly didn't put enough sunscreen there, and that's what the smear is. To this day, that's almost a year later, a full year, I still have a mark there. Like, that's how bad the burn was. That's basically sun poisoning, right?
Yeah,
there. That's that bad.
The sun is no joke. You got to take care of yourself if you're outdoors.
Yeah, it'll kill you. I mean, that's what we learned from that disaster movie, The Core, right? It'll basically cook the planet unless the core keeps spinning.
Exactly. All right, shifting back to movies. We're going to talk about film scores here in just a moment. Before we do, though, a couple of housekeeping items I want to note up front because this week is going to be crazy. It's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be a lot of fun, though. So we're doing film scores on this episode 640. We actually have 3 reviews coming out this week versus the 2 that we normally do. because it was a crazy busy week. At the box office, we had 2 major releases coming down the pipeline this week, and 3 if you're one of the lucky theaters that got The Life of Chuck. That is going more wide next week. It did get a little bit of a release over the weekend. However, we did get Ballerina, the John Wick spinoff, and we got Wes Anderson's The Phoenician Scheme. Brennan and I will be talking about the new Wes Anderson because, of course, we love ourselves some Wes Anderson.
Duh.
Because, duh. And due to scheduling, Brennan and I, we weren't able to get to Ballerina. So we actually have 2 InSession Film writers handling that.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Megan Kearns and Max Vincent, who both of them have been guests here on the show before.
Yeah.
They volunteered and are going to be doing Ballerina. That is already recorded and will go up very, very soon as well. Brennan and I also have a second film that we're going to tackle. I have been harping on this for a few weeks now, ever since I got a chance to see it. I've really wanted I wanted Brennan to see this because of 2 major reasons. One, Brennan loves a good hangout movie. He loves a good hangout movie. And also,
my jam.
As we just noted, we're big sports people as well. And so I really wanted to talk about the film Ephus that came out earlier in the year. I think Brennan is going to get, I think he's going to have a lot of fun with that.
Oh, yeah. I've already seen it. Have you seen my Letterboxd review of it yet?
I have not seen it, no.
Okay.
My weekend has been nuts.
Okay. Well, if you don't want to know anything, I won't say anything.
Yeah, maybe we'll go in blind. Generally, I think he would really like it a lot.
Basically, if I'm not preparing you for anything, that means I don't want there to be any surprises. So just know that going in.
Okay, fair enough. And it's also interesting because even though it's a baseball movie, there's an element of the film that also correlates to my sports life in a practical reason. I literally just came home as we are recording this from my own Ephus, if you will, because I play beer league hockey during the weekends. I just got home from a game, and there's so much of that in the film that it's crazy.
What would the hockey version of that movie be called? Is there a particular snapshot that you can actually correlate that's similar to the I guess the thematic
to the Ephus pitch?
Yeah, to the thematic reason of how the Ephus pitch correlates to that movie?
I'd have to think about it. I don't know if there's a special shot. There could be a specific kind of deke.
Okay.
That's real. I'm a big Red Wings fan. Like Pavel Datsyuk really changed the game. Or I do have one. The Michigan, they call it.
Okay, so in that case, it'll have to be called The Michigan just to help distinguish it.
Yeah, The Michigan. And the reason they call it that, this comes from a game I watched live as a kid. It was a college game between my Michigan Wolverines and the Minnesota Gophers. And one of the Michigan players from behind the net, he scooped the puck off of his stick. Yeah. So he didn't pass it and he didn't shoot it. He literally scooped it onto the blade, and he took the blade, and it's basically like he turned his hockey stick into like a lacrosse stick for a second.
I was going to say, it almost sounds like you're describing a spatula.
Yeah, kind of. He kind of turned it into a spatula. He scooped it up, and then from behind the goal, he scooped it into the goal. And no one had ever done that before. Everyone was confused as hell at the time. It was the first time it ever happened.
Kind of sounds like a pretty common field hockey move, but maybe not so much in ice hockey.
It was a game changer. And the skill of today's hockey is so ridiculous that it happens. It's commonplace now. It happens all the time, especially with the younger players. They love doing it. They love showboating like that. And so you get it in real games. It's not just clips that go viral on TikTok and Instagram. They do it live in games. And it's a move that you can actually do now in a strategic way. Mm-hmm. That's still a little bit showboaty, but you can do it in a way that makes sense. Yeah. And anyway, that would be, I would say that's That's the hockey version is
the
the
Eva's
Michigan.
pitch. Okay.
And look, all I'm saying is if they ever make a hockey version of that film, it might replace Citizen Kane as my favorite film of all time. Like I will endlessly love
this
that movie.
EFIS is starting to get some traction, at least within those of us in the film critic community. So if it's enough to give Carson Lund, I believe the filmmaker's name is, maybe he'll create his own like cinematic universe of sorts where every movie is a different sport, but a beer league for that sport.
Mhm.
I would be completely in on that if that were the case.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I mean, just from the sports element of it, there's so much to relate with. And I don't want to get too much into the film. We're not reviewing it here, but there is a level of pathos to that film as well. There's a spirituality to it, given the premise of the film and why they're playing that baseball game on that specific field that we'll talk about, which does add layers to that film among the baseball and the hangout of it, the beer league element of it. I cannot wait to get into that film. I have not stopped thinking about it.
You're already reading my thoughts on Letterboxd, so this is just another case of us reading each other's notes.
There you go. Yeah. Go figure. So I really wanted to talk about that. So and because Ballerina didn't really work out for Brendan and I, this opportunity came, and I really wanted to jump on it. So we're going to talk about the new Wes Anderson. We're going to talk about EFIS. Ballerina also comes. So we're going to have 3 reviews this week. So it's going to be a lot, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And there will be a new Women InSession at the end of the week as well.
Yep.
Speaking of Women InSession, I wanted to bring them up as well. They had a really spirited and lovely conversation on their latest episode talking about Michael Fassbender. And they always do. I love their conversations. They do a great job over there.
Yeah.
But I did want to bring up my boy, Michael Fassbender, because there are a few films of his where I feel like I had to champion him here a little bit. And I do understand some of the pushback because his career admittedly has been a bit all over the place.
It's a bit wonky.
And the Women InSession crew do a great job of talking about that. He had some great movies early on. He then gets cast as Magneto. The X-Men films, most of them, not all of them, most of them have been really good. He had his Oscar winning or nominated work in the 12 Years a Slave.
He was nominated. Yeah.
He was nominated. Yeah, I was trying to remember.
Yeah, I think the winning performance from that movie was Lupita Nyong'o.
Lupita. Okay, yeah. So you have that element of his career. He also has Hunger and Shame, which are usually talked about as his 2 best performances, and they deservedly so. So. He's phenomenal in those movies. And so the Women InSession crew do a really great job of covering the gamut there. The 2010s, though, especially the back half of the 2010s, it's kind of
questionable,
kind of crazy. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So, and this is where I feel like I have to step up to the plate a little bit here for Fassbender, because I understand why people, for example, don't love his Macbeth, or why they don't love his partnership with Terrence Malick, for example. But I'm going to go to bat for those movies. I understand why others don't love Macbeth, but I really do like that film, and I think he's great in it. And I like the
visual language is great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I will always go to bat for Terrence Malick. And I think his work in Terrence Malick is fantastic.
Okay.
And then you have the Alien films. Alien Covenant, which I don't love Alien Covenant, but I think he's great in that movie.
I think Alien Covenant certainly works better when you actually start realizing that David is the main character of what was going to be that particular portion of the Alien series. And I think there's more fascination there, but he is great in that movie, especially playing 2 roles. I think there is obviously an argument to be had that his performances in both Shame and Hunger probably they'll probably be his two best performances for quite a while. But
Mhm.
any misses that he had in the 2010s, especially in the back half of the 2010s, I wouldn't really say are his fault. He was in a lot of strange movies. The Snowman, not a good movie. He's not really the problem in that movie.
Yeah.
Even if it is maybe a lesser performance, but there are so many other circumstances around that film, other factors playing a part into that are they're going to limit any great actor's performance, just given
Mhm.
how that movie was unfortunately made. But I do think he has still done some very interesting work in that period. You mentioned he was nominated for an Oscar for 12 Years a Slave, working with Steve McQueen once again. So I would love to see that partnership come back and play, him working with Steve
Uh-huh.
McQueen again. But I still think he has done some very interesting work. I think, if anything, he just became so bankable, so franchisable. So maybe the X-Men films were a big part of that, but he still brought his all to the majority of those movies. And if there were any blemishes within those movies, it had nothing to do with Fassbender. He tried his best, even if the material, let's say X-Men Apocalypse, wasn't the greatest. So he at least still tried, and I appreciate
Mhm.
that out of him.
No, I agree as well. And while I wouldn't go to bat for something like The Counselor, I feel like that film has been revisited over the last few years,
Yeah,
and a lot of people are
especially
coming around to it.
especially the director's cut. It's one of those
Yeah,
cases where I feel
which I
like,
haven't
once again,
seen,
in
admittedly.
Ridley Scott fashion, if you see the director's cut, you get the better movie. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, which is why I do need to see it, because I did not at all like the theatrical cut of that
Mhm.
film. It's also been a decade. I haven't really seen the film since it came out. I really did not go for it at the time. However, given how I feel about Ridley Scott now and how much I really deeply appreciate him and his no bullshit ethos,
His arrogance is amazing. I love it.
it's so good. I deeply love it.
Yeah.
I would love to go back and see The Council again, especially the director's cut. Maybe that is a film I would go for. I don't know. Really loved Frank. I thought that was great. X-Men Days of
Sure.
Future Past is maybe my favorite X-Men. And while he's not necessarily the nucleus of the heart of that film, I still think he's always great as Magneto, and I think he's really good in that film as well.
Mhm.
Slow West was fantastic. Really love Slow West, and I think a lot of people do admire that film to one degree or another. I will always go to bat for Steve Jobs. I know Steve Jobs was
Mhm.
a bit of a Oscar player the year that it came out. I don't recall off the cuff all the nominations it might have received, but it was very much in the conversation at the time. But I do really like that film. And I
You know,
think
yeah.
like the reason it works for me, I mean, I do love the Danny Boyle of it all. I think the writing, the Sorkin writing is really effective there. But I think it is also one of Danny Boyle's most interesting movies, thematically speaking, especially that final act, I think is a
Mhm.
gut punch. It's really, really great because that whole movie essentially is about a man who creates this product. There's, of course, conflict. There is business conflict that we see in that film for sure. And he comes and goes, but it's all about the product. It's about Apple and selling a product. But
Mhm.
there's also an element of the film regarding his daughter, something that he helped create, something that he also made. And
Yeah.
in that first act, he essentially does not even care to address like her existence. She doesn't even exist as far as he is concerned. It's all about
Yeah.
selling the company. And then in the third act comes and the film really wrestles with that. And it's about him realizing that he created another product that while he had forgotten about it, it did mean something to him in
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah.
And I think all of that works in the film partially because of Sorkin, but I think even more so because of Fassbender. Like his performance really sells those ideas.
The more we talk about something like Steve Jobs, I'm gonna make a weird comparison here to another movie that isn't anything like Steve Jobs, but it sort of plays into similar criticisms that you and many other people have had for this other movie, but you have often talked about how a movie like The Rise of Skywalker doesn't do enough to justify or add context to the gap between the original trilogy and where Luke Skywalker is in that particular movie. Steve Jobs is kind of doing that 3 different times in one movie. There are massive time jumps there. And yet Michael Fassbender is there to add the necessary context when you get to that new portion in time. So that's an example of maybe that type of narrative approach working in the movie's favor. And I think a lot of that is because of Michael Fassbender's performance. And it's also a movie, going back to Danny Boyle. I mean, he's a filmmaker where some of his tricks and some of his stylistic choices don't always work for me. So to see a movie like that where he's putting those tricks a little bit more in the back burner, there's a lot more restraint in that movie when compared to some of his others. I kind of like that.
I agree. I agree. I do love the one indulgence that he has, though, when he's about to be kicked out of his company and there's all of these backroom conversations, and he's having this remarkable fight. There's this verbal sparring between him and another character. I'm trying to remember which one it is off the cuff. It's been a while since
was that Seth Rogen's character, or was it Jeff Daniels?
It was Jeff Daniels. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
Yes. So they're having a bit of a spat, but intercut in all of that are these flashbacks that visually articulate what they're arguing about. And it's an extended sequence. This goes on for like 9 minutes.
Yeah.
And it simultaneously works as exposition to help, to get the audience caught up on everything that had happened in the past and what's led to this fight in the moment. And so it's clever exposition because so much of the argument or the conflict is happening in the moment, but they're arguing about the past. And to bring context to that, we do see these flashbacks. And underneath all of that is Daniel Pemberton's score, and it is striking. Appropriate for this episode.
I was going to say, there's a nice tie-in.
Really good. Really good. I mean, some of the best score work in any Danny Boyle film. And like that is the most Danny Boyle that film gets, but it is really, really good. Because I agree with you, on the whole, for Danny Boyle, he shows really good restraint in that film, but I do love that he just can't help himself at times either.
Oh yeah,
but it makes sense. It makes sense when he does it.
Like even one of the final shots of the film where it's Steve Jobs standing on top of a building by himself. There's a bit of a tilt to that shot, which feels very Danny Boyle, but it's not overloaded with tricks like that. It's not like something like The Beach, for instance, which has a straight up video game sequence out of nowhere. I know that was kind of going viral for a few days there, so it's a nice tie back to Danny Boyle. But yeah, I think Steve Jobs is quite a good movie. I remember really liking that one, and Michael Fassbender, of course, great performance in it.
Yeah, he's really great. He is the nucleus of that film in many ways. I don't think that film works nearly as well as it does without his performance, which is why I wanted to bring it up. I think it's really great. It's an underrated Boyle film on the whole, really well scored, and his Fassbender's performance, I do think it is one of the better of his career for sure.
I'd say maybe top 5 for him. Although if we look ahead a little bit and think of some of his performances from, let's say, the 2020s, this particular decade, I mean, he's great in The Killer. David Fincher's The Killer.
Well, and I was going to build to that because part of the argument with the Women InSession crew was, is he back? And I don't know if he ever left, to be perfecly fair.
I think he just made strange choices for a while that seemed to be pretty consistent with one another, because you had the snowman, like I mentioned earlier, but then there are a few other weird choices there, like Trespass Against Us and Assassin's Creed. And again, most of those failures were obviously not due to Michael Fassbender, but there was a bankability in trying to turn Michael Fassbender into a bit of a movie star. And whenever we see that happen, that usually has, diminishing returns pretty quickly for a lot of actors. Yeah.
I mean, admittedly, 2016 and 17 and 19, not great.
Rough years.
That wasn't a very good stretch. But to your point, I don't think it was as much him, because I don't think he has the ability to phone in a performance. But I do think he needed a new agent, perhaps.
Yeah.
He was bad at picking projects during that time because again, his 2014 work was great. 2015, including Macbeth. I will go to bat for Macbeth. I think he's really great in that film, and it's one that I really admire, but understandably, it's not for everybody. 2016, Apocalypse, The Light Between Oceans, Assassin's Creed, Trespass Against Us. Okay,
I kind of like The Light Between Oceans. I don't hate that movie.
I don't hate it either. I don't hate it either. I don't think it's great, but it is.
No,
look,
there's a few misguided things about it, but again, Michael Fassbender is at least coming to play.
It might as well be Citizen Kane, though, compared to those others.
Oh, it's the best of those options. Yeah, it has no choice but to be.
Yeah, and look, I don't love Covenant, and The Snowman is really bad. Song to Song, again, I'm a Mallet guy. I can't help myself.
It's a fascinating movie. I don't love that one as much. It might be my least favorite Malick movie, but it's at least an interesting movie nonetheless. Yeah,
it is. It is probably quite easily my least favorite, but I still find it compelling for sure. There's the Malick of it all. I will always be interested in, and I think he's really good there. I think he fits into the Malick world seamlessly. And then with 2019, I just have to take the L there, I guess. Most people do not like that film. It is still, to this day, my most liked review on Letterboxd.
What, for Dark Phoenix?
For Dark Phoenix, yeah.
Yeah. I am so glad you at least found some tasty Kool-Aid to drink in that movie. I'm not one of them, sadly. That movie does not work for me. It was a very checked out movie, but I don't necessarily disagree with some of the things you like about it. At least what it seems like the movie is going for. It makes it a very unique movie.
That's the thing that I really struggle to comprehend with at least maybe the discourse surrounding that film. I feel like I truly have never felt so isolated in the sense that, did I watch a different movie than everybody else? I must think that, because how often do we talk about these blockbusters just full of bland, banal action? You never get to know the characters. It's all hollow writing. Dark Phoenix is a film that is way more committed to the moral complexities of its characters and the choices they make than the action. I agree the action is not the best part of that film, hands down, because it was so focused on the moral conflict at play. And I don't understand at all how we're just willing to throw that out with the bathwater. You get that in a big blockbuster ever.
It's just not a well-made movie supporting some of those things. It's like if you go back to, let's say, something like X-Men Apocalypse, which I think as a movie is much better than Dark Phoenix, but I think Dark Phoenix is a more interesting movie by comparison, given what it's going for. And I think that does add something kind of neat about it. Underneath the failures of that movie is something kind of weird and unique. So I will give it that.
Yeah, I mean, I will take Dark Phoenix over a lot of other mainstream movies, blockbuster movies.
Certainly better than X-Men Origins Wolverine.
It's better than that. I think it's way better than Apocalypse. Apocalypse is an extremely messy movie that's not nearly as interested in the moral complexities of its characters.
Oh, that's basically a Power Rangers movie. That's basically what that turns into.
It's way too bogged down in plot and action. It doesn't really focus on character. Like I feel like when we criticize blockbusters for being bland in all of these areas, Apocalypse is quintessential. I feel to that argument.
I think
Dark Phoenix, it might lack in action, but it's because it's committing every ounce of energy it has to these really compelling arguments that the characters find themselves in.
I think
shouldn't we want that more?
Didn't we defend? I think we defended Apocalypse when it first came out back in, what was that, 2016? I think it was. I kind of want to go back and listen to that review that you and I had
Maybe.
to see what we
I
actually
don't
had to
know.
say about it, because I look back on that movie not very fondly, and I wonder
don't
what we
either.
may have said at the time.
I don't know. I know. Who knows? I might be a little nervous to go back and listen to it now that you
Yeah,
said
sometimes
that.
I don't like going back to the archives, but this time I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, and you might be right. I mean, there probably are things to appreciate about that film. I certainly don't have any fond memories of Apocalypse.
I don't remember it. No, I don't
That is
remember
for
that
sure.
at all.
I don't remember that either. But I do have fond memories of Dark Phoenix. I don't think it's nearly as bad as people say. But
It's not the worst
not
X-Men
great.
movie, I'll say that.
And it's got a really good score from Hans Zimmer as well. So, I mean, as far as mindless, superficial blockbusters go, I don't think Dark Phoenix is anywhere near the bottom. But again, I have to concede that a lot of people don't feel that way. And I don't see what they see. I don't. I truly don't understand it.
I do and I don't. It's a weird kind of dichotomy. But I don't disagree with the uniqueness that movie has to offer. Anyway,
Which is
we were
all of that to
talking about
say,
Michael Fassbender.
And look, because I wanted to defend the movie much like Macbeth and Song to Song, because when people talk about Fassbender's career, they're like, oh my God, he made all of these horrible movies. And yeah, that is partially true for sure. But I think depending on the person, and again, I'm just offering my perspective, but I think in between these bad choices he made, you get a Song to Song. I don't think Dark Phoenix is all that bad. Steve Jobs is really good. Macbeth, I think, is really good. And even though we only touched it a little bit earlier, like The Light Between Oceans isn't the worst thing I've ever seen either. I think that's a fine movie.
It's okay.
Like it's not
okay.
bad. So like, yes, in between Apocalypse and Covenant for me, maybe not so much for Brendan, but or Assassin's Creed and The Snowman, there's these good movies. And then you get to the 2020s, to your point a moment ago, Brendan, The killer movie. I think it's great. It's excellent. That streaming on Netflix and it being a movie that is a meta commentary on itself in some regard, I think is incredible.
That is like Disney greenlighting the movie Dumbo that Tim Burton distributed, and them not realizing it's a giant critique on Disney.
Yeah.
Because The Killer hates Netflix. That movie hates Netflix as a company, and yet they still chose to distribute it.
It is very much Fincher wrestling with the idea that he makes movies for streaming. That's what that film is in a lot of ways. And Fassbender's awesome in the film. I think he's really great.
I agree.
Next Goal Wins. We'll skip that.
That's very much in line with like 2016, 2017, 2019.
Yeah. But Kneecap, he has a small little supporting role, but I think he's excellent in that film. I think he's really good. A few scenes that are actually quite pivotal to that film. It's a small role, admittedly, but I think he's excellent. And then Black Bag from earlier this year, loved it. I loved him in it.
I think that's a top 5 performance for him in Black Bag.
It might be. Yeah. I'm totally there with you. I still think it's one of the best films of this year so far.
Oh, it's top 3 for sure.
Yeah, it's really, really good. So, earlier I noted that Fassbender, I don't think he really went anywhere. And I meant that artistically, he very literally, physically left Hollywood for a good portion.
Yeah.
Dark Phoenix comes out in 2019, and the next thing we see him in is in The Killer in 2023. So he did disappear for a few years. He took a break and is driving race cars and all that fun stuff.
So interesting.
So
what an interesting
physically
man.
Leave.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to his acting, I think it's always been there. He chose some terrible projects for sure, but I don't know. I've always really loved him, and I don't think even in those bad movies, I don't think he's not the reason they're bad. To your point.
No, I don't think I've ever seen him give a bad performance. Maybe the closest would be, I don't know how you feel about this, but the closest for me would probably be Next Goal Wins. Is maybe the only time I didn't. I think it's less so on him giving a bad performance and more so I just don't think his talents mesh well with Taika Waititi's style. I think if anything, he's more miscast than anything else.
Yeah, miscast, and also I think Taika Waititi, I think there's a reason that film was in production hell for a long time.
Yeah, Taika Waititi just gets in the way. He gets in his own way.
He gets in the way. I agree. And I think, like there's a few moments where that film does blossom and it's usually revolved around him and his performance. But generally, I agree with you. The comedic sensibilities of that film don't work. But it's hard for me to know if that's really Fassbender or if that's just Taika Waititi really stumbling over that one. Because there's not much about it that is great, especially from a comedic perspective.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I don't know. Yeah. Certainly a disappointing film from Taika Waititi for sure. But generally, I think Fassbender's great. I love him. I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, he's good.
I thought the Women InSession crew did a really great job of stirring fascinating conversation.
Hey, if we're responding to it in the way that we are, that means their conversation was very stimulating.
It was good. It was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. I do urge people to go and give that episode a listen. It is available right now. All right, Brennan, let's talk about sailing and traveling. I don't know if you're doing any international traveling this summer. I am not, but a lot of people are.
No, a lot of people
love
are.
to travel overseas. And if you're going to travel overseas, the one thing that everyone can relate with is that international roaming fees can rack up really fast.
Oh, it's
if
devastating.
you don't change your SIM card.
Especially if you're traveling for work and you have to do it often. This is just devastating.
Would you know how to remove your phone's SIM card if you had to?
In my old phone, yes, but now that I have an iPhone, heck no.
I don't know.
They make it virtually impossible.
I would have no clue. I would have to do a whole bunch of research to figure that out, or I'd have to take it to an expert to do it for me.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to deal with all of that. That's why Saily is incredible, because it is an eSIM. It is an app on your phone that you can download, and they reduce or even eliminate roaming fees altogether. It's extremely easy to use. It's extremely affordable, and Saily has data plans for virtually any country in the world, which is awesome.
It makes it so easy for those who do travel very often. Everything is convenient and safe as you travel. You don't need to wait in line at the airport for whatever local SIM card they're going to give you. So that's a stress-free option there as well.
Yes.
You can also avoid scammers who are trying to sell you fake SIM cards, which was such a thing that many people did back in the day before iPhones even became a thing. That was always a dangerous thing to look out for, and this allows a risk-free alternative for that. You don't have to wander looking for public Wi-Fi spots either. With an eSIM, you're always connected, and it's just so easy to use.
Very easy to use, and if you get the unlimited data plan, you'll never have to worry about running out of data, which is awesome. And if all of that wasn't good enough, Saily is built by Nord Security, meaning that your privacy is going to be protected, so you can browse confidently knowing that Saily through Nord will block all malicious ads, help you stay safe as you adventure out into the world. The app is available on all iOS and Androids. You never have to reinstall the app. Simply choose a plan and you're good to go. Anytime you got to travel, they have support chat 24/7 as well. You can't go wrong with Saily. So click the link in our description, and at checkout, use the code ISF5 for 5% off. Again, click the link in the description at checkout. After you pick your plan, use the code ISF5, and you'll get an extra 5% off. Risk-free. If you're traveling, you got to go with Saily. Go check them out. And we thank them for their support. Brendan, let's talk about T-shirts.
All right, Film Score Junkie. All right, Film Score Junkie.
I got one on. If you're a Film Score Junkie like me and you want the world to know about it, you can go to our store. Go to InSessionFilm.com/store, and you'll see all the T-shirts we have available there. Or you can just go to InSessionFilm.dashery.com. Go directly to the source itself, and you can see our store there. Dashery hosts our store for us. You can see all the designs, that we have available, including this little guy here, Film Score Junkie.
Yeah, it's a
But
great
we
one.
also we have one dedicated to Sinners that came out earlier in the year. If you're a Sinners fan like we are,
Yeah.
we have Chasing the Gold, Women in Session. We got our main logos
Yep.
on all kinds of fun stuff. So
We have
go,
a lot.
go check all
We
of
have
that
a lot.
out.
JD's gotten really
Yeah.
creative with some of these designs, and we even go a bit
appreciate it,
obscure
yeah.
with some of these.
Mhm.
I mean, we have one for Midnight Special of all things.
We do.
Yeah,
Yep, we got
it's
a
really
nice
clever
special
stuff.
shirt. We got it an Arrival shirt as well. All kinds of inspired T-shirts. Stop turning art into sports if that's your thing. The best thing that ever happened to La La Land is that it lost Best Picture to Moonlight, which I still stand by. So, all of that is there. It's available for you to go and check out. Again, InSessionFilm.com/store, or go straight to the source, InSessionFilm.dashery.com. Of course, we have links in the description if you want to go and check that out. And it's a great way to support us. You'll look
Absolutely.
awesome, and you're supporting this show along the way. And all the money we get goes directly into funding this. So
Yeah.
we really, really do appreciate everyone that supports us. You really do mean the world to us. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the juicy part of the show.
Oh, I'm excited.
To the
This was a
part
great
where
topic.
we nerd out, because we are film score junkies. This is where we're going to inject ourselves with cinematic cocaine and fuel our film score hallucinations.
Cinematic cocaine.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
I did not expect you to say that. That was amazing.
I don't know what I'm talking about in that regard, but still a film score junkie. Very, very excited to talk about these film scores. And it's interesting because I'm not a musician at all. Have never really been all that musical. Brennan is the music nerd of the two of us. But despite not being a musician like everyone else on the planet, I, of course, love music, but particularly find myself in the film score world more times than not. I would venture to say that film scores are 80 to 90% of all that I listen to.
Oh yeah,
I don't
that's your
listen-
genre. That's your genre.
That's
of
what I
music.
listen to.
Yeah.
I don't listen to pop music at all. There's so much discourse on pop music all the time. Have no idea. Couldn't tell you about any of that. All I do is listen to film scores because I love it. Again, I'm a junkie. I'm a junkie for them.
Hey,
can I
yeah.
articulate and explain in explicit detail and musical notes how a film score works or why it works for me? No, I will leave that up to Brennan and the great musical artists that do that on YouTube. But I will do my best to express the feelings that these scores give me. And that's what I love about them. That's why I listen to them. In doing homework for this, I sent Brendan this text. I actually tweeted about it as well. I went through a bunch of these scores, especially the ones that are on my list.
Yeah.
And I genuinely, thankfully, I did this during my youngest. That's it. Brendan's showing the text that I sent him.
Yeah.
If
For
you're watching the
context,
video.
for those who are listening just in podcast form, if you go to our YouTube page and watch this podcast in video form, I'm showing the brief little GIF here that JD sent me of a woman crying tears of joy, which JD said was his experience doing homework for this exercise.
Exactly. Yeah, my youngest was taking his nap. My oldest was in his room listening to music and playing Xbox. So I'm just lounging around, doing laundry, doing the dishes, playing a little PlayStation myself. But I'm listening to all these scores. And as I'm doing, or as I'm just walking around the house doing whatever, I am absolutely losing my mind. Like hashtag JD tears all over the place, all over the house. I had a great time. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. So yes, the scores that I'm going to talk about, some of them anyway, very, very moving. And that's the only way I can articulate it, is in that way. But we'll have fun here.
We're going to have fun here.
Okay. Did you have any criteria for this? I know last week we briefly talked about how little criteria we had.
Yeah, very little. Once again, mostly just going back to what movies and what nominees I had over the past few award shows that we've done this decade to see if things still stick. It's basically my way of doing homework for these to see which ones I still really love. But mostly looking at it in the same way that I would any award show that we do each year. How great is a musical score functioning melodically? How memorable is it? How complex is it for whatever reason? More importantly, how well does it fit the film it's made for, narratively, thematically, emotionally? We often talk about how a great film score can also feel like great film editing if done a certain way. And that we say that because oftentimes a great film score doesn't just work on its own, it's how it's intertwined within the movie itself. And that's how I tend to determine what makes a great film score on top of, what it is doing musically. I might allude to some of the complexities in these arrangements as we talk further, but all of these things are what I look for in a great film score. And I'm basically looking at what are the 5 best of the best when it comes to this. And I will say, JD, when we first decided on this topic, I got a little nervous thinking, this is going to be challenging. This is going to be hard. It actually wasn't for me. This was was kind of an easy one for me. Yeah, I landed on 5 pretty quickly, and I've pretty much held to those 5 since we first started or first decided on this topic, and I'm very happy with it. So like that made it kind of an interesting exercise in some ways. It was more so just trying to figure out how I can articulate why I think these are the most immediately gratifying scores of the decade for me.
Yeah. No, I think that's very fair. And in terms of how I approach this, it's very similar to you and somewhat of what I was talking about a moment ago regarding how effective these scores are in context of the film. I think that is really important because there are some great scores that I really love listening to out of context, but in the film, maybe they don't work as much, sometimes vice versa there as well. But I really wanted to look at scores that are really effective in the film and also out of context musically, how evocative it is in that regard. Not that was a major priority, but certainly something I looked at. I mostly wanted to look at how does it complement the visuals on the screen, the characters, the storytelling, the themes. How does the music weave itself into those images to complement what's there without undermining or taking away from that visual or thematic component?
Yeah.
Because sometimes scores can be overbearing, and that does not make them effective. Conclave, for example, is that for me. And spoiler alert, Conclave is not on my list. And I struggled with this a lot last year. I talked about it quite often in the review and even at the InSession Film Awards. That is a great example of what I'm talking about. I love that score out of context. It is awesome to listen to on Spotify. I actually have the record of it over here as well that plays great.
It's a great score if you listen to it not knowing it came from Conclave.
Exactly. It is so good. I love the music itself. I can easily put that record on my player and listen to it and have the greatest time. I love it. I do not think it works in the film. I think it is a bit overbearing for that film and overly melodramatic. And it turns that film into something that I don't think always works in terms of the melodrama. Yeah. So that's an example of where
jarring. Very jarring.
That polarity does create conflict that I struggle to find that middle ground there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that, that's ultimately what I'm working with here. I do want these scores to work in context of the film. As far as your point at how quickly these came to mind, because I did go through, I looked at my previous list. There were 4 scores that immediately came to mind for me that are on my list here. Now, the ordering of them took some thought.
Yeah, that's true. There were definitely some shifts there. I will say my number 1 was immediate, and it's been my number 1 since we first decided on this topic.
Okay. Yeah, that's very fair. Number 5 for me is where things get a little bit difficult for me, because there is one score that I picked as far as best score of that particular year.
Okay.
However, if it came out in another year, would it have won over some others we got later on in the decade? That I don't know. Don't know. So there is one winner from the InSession Film Awards that I have in honorable mentions.
Okay.
So that fifth spot did create some interesting, what do I do here?
Okay.
Because there were probably about 6 or 7 scores I considered for that fifth spot. That to me is where it became challenging.
It was more
And that's
challenging
the
there
difference
for sure.
between you and
It was more challenging there for sure, because I did start looking at how would I round out a top 10 here, which we'll certainly talk about when we get to the end of this. But I could make an argument that anything in my 6 through 10 right now should be in my top 5. I could easily make that argument.
Yeah.
So you're right. It does get a little more challenging in that regard. At this point, though, I am still very happy with my 5. And I do wonder, looking at, I do wonder, looking at my 5 right now, I mean, we're going to have crossover here. We have to, because even though you're not a musician like I am, you and I still respond to film scores in relatively the same way. So I wouldn't be surprised if our brains go to some very similar choices. I would not be surprised by that at all.
I wouldn't be surprised either. I am really curious where this goes. Looking at my list, I think we have 2 crossover. But maybe I'm underrating. I could be underrating 1 or 2 others, but
I think we might have 3.
You okay? 3?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. All right. Let's go ahead and get into this. Then, Brendan, what do you have at number 5?
Number 5, I'm going to a very unique situation, because technically speaking, my number 5 isn't an original film score. That's Iko Ishibashi's work for Evil Does Not Exist.
This is good stuff.
The Ryosuke Hamaguchi film. And the reason why this is such a unique situation is because it more or less started as a visual album or a visual performance. It was a live performance from Ishibashi that Hamaguchi then directed visuals for. And as far as I understand, the movie itself was mostly made as sort of a reverse engineering exercise of that music into this particular film, which is a very unique situation. I mean, technically speaking, is this a film score? Yes, but it's not an original film score. Like, this is something that wouldn't be eligible per the Academy's guidelines, if I'm not mistaken. So that makes it a wildly unique situation for a film score. But I think that backstory makes a lot of sense, just given how the music is so front and center here. In many ways, it is the star of the movie. It also directs the emotional trajectory of this film as this eco-fable. And I don't think the movie would work without it. And it kind of defines the movie in a lot of ways. I mentioned this earlier during my criteria. We often talk about how film scores can also be a form of film editing. And I think this is a great example of that. Maybe even one of the best examples of that we've seen this decade, because it really does create a literal movement for this movie. It's kind of like classical music in some ways, and how you pair that with certain visuals, especially of nature. It is very much of that kind of exercise. It's very commonplace in classical music. That's basically how this functions. And I think it's really beautiful and very hypnotic as well. Really quite great.
I love this score as well. A really solid honorable mention for me. It was nominated for me at this last year's InSession Film Awards. I echo everything you said there, Brennan, and I love how complimentary this score is. It is a very understated meditative film, so this score perfectly complements that mood with the textures it has, and it uses these ambient drones and distant percussions that just really give that film this constant humming that beautifully just narrates what we're seeing on screen.
It kind of sounds like nature speaking to us in a way.
Yeah. Honestly, you think about that opening shot of the film and how that camera just moves through the forest. The score is doing, I guess, and the camera, but together they're doing all of the lifting there.
Yeah.
And
And
it
it
is
goes on for like
gorgeous.
6 or 7 minutes.
It
And
goes on for a long time.
I'll tell you what, I
Yeah.
never got sick of it.
Oh,
I
me
went into
either.
this movie not
I
really
was
knowing what the
hypnotized.
vibe was
Yeah.
going to be, and 6 or 7 minutes in, that's all we get is this upward camera shot of the sky with the trees surrounding it, and that music, and it's just slowly panning down. That's all it does for a good chunk of time, and I was never bored. I was constantly invested in the nothingness that it was giving us.
Yeah, it's really good. I completely agree. I love how the score itself fits this meditative mold that is what the film is doing, and it's great.
Absolutely.
I absolutely love it. Good stuff. All right, maybe appropriate here. My number 5 is a little bit of a cheat as well, in the sense that I'm going with 2 films here. At number 5, I am going with Hans Zimmer, Dune Part 1 and Part 2 collectively.
Okay, that's fair.
The Dune
That's fair.
experience.
Okay, I'll give you that, because I mean they are such a pair. They really are such a pair.
They're very much, in fact, so much of a pair that the stupid Academy didn't even consider Part 2 because it was too close to Part 1 or whatever their stupid math is.
Wasn't
Anyway,
that
it's
the same
ridiculous.
case for Howard Shore and his Lord of the Rings work?
Perhaps, I don't know. You're asking the wrong guy that question.
I do not know what the percentage splits of new versus existing score was between those 3 movies, but it couldn't have been that different from Dune's Part 1 and 2.
I don't know. I don't know. Either way, regardless of how you want to deliberate the math, and as far as Oscar eligibility goes, I think to your larger point, they are very much of a piece. They are 2 peas in the same pod, and they wonderfully exhibit what I love so much about this current era of Hans Zimmer and his experimental ethos. I do love that while it does very much reverberate classical Hans Zimmer nucleus in some ways, at the same time, the way it escalates, the way it complements the world in which we are thrust into, it's also unlike anything that we've seen from Hans Zimmer. And I love how he brings the planet of Arrakis alive with just the music, or how he complements certain scenes. In Part 2, you get this love theme that permeates on screen that is now a part of one of the most iconic images of Part 2. It's really great. I love the use of vocalizations. Lisa Gerard coming back to work with Hans Zimmer once again.
Yeah, very tribal.
Yes, I love that element. He's also using different instruments. And again, I can't articulate the specificities of those. However, if you ever see him live on stage, which I have seen him now live twice, one of them post the Dune movies, and he talked eloquently at that concert about these new instruments that he had never used in any other movies, but they felt appropriate to the world of Dune. So again, going back to how experimental much of this is for him, he's using new instruments in clever and intuitive ways to immerse us further into this world, to create something that is distinct and it's captivating. I've absolutely loved his work. And he won the Oscar for one, right? That's his second Oscar, I believe.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I'll double check that quickly, but I did want to speak to your point about Hans Zimmer getting very experimental and utilizing different instruments that he hasn't really utilized before. Because what makes his work on Dune so effective is how it just seems to complement the sense of place. And I believe what he was doing instrumentally was really incorporating elements of like Middle Eastern music into this, which was very new for him, but somehow it weirdly fits, like the tribalism of Dune and Arrakis specifically. I think that's really effective stuff.
Yes. And if I remember correctly, because I should have recorded it in hindsight, but that live concert I went to, I think he talked specifically about these unique woodwinds that he had never used before, and maybe it speaks to the culture that you're talking about.
Mhm.
But those woodwinds created almost like this ancient tone that fit the world of Arrakis really well. So it was something to that effect.
Yeah.
And either way, regardless of how it all came together in those movies, he
Yeah.
does create something spellbinding.
Yeah.
That
And
just
he did
immerses you into that world.
and he did win the Oscar for Dune Part 1.
Yeah, yeah. Which is why it was crazy that he couldn't even be nominated for Dune Part 2. Absolutely insane.
Well, maybe that's also why, because politics do not exist in Hollywood whatsoever.
Yeah. But I love the Dune movies, and that score from Hans Zimmer is certainly among his best work in some time. I would argue he probably should have won another Oscar in between The Lion King and Dune, but I love his work in Dune, and I have no problem with him winning that Oscar at all. I think it's great. I love it. Obviously, I do think it is one of the best scores of this decade so far, collectively, especially. I do think the way we talk about the score to Star Wars or The Lord of the Rings in time when it comes to these big blockbuster movies, I think Hans Zimmer's Dune will be a part of that conversation, that same conversation.
Yeah. I wanted to have something from Hans Zimmer represented here in some way. I think his work on Dune makes for a great honorable mention for me. Not quite in my top 10, but very, very close because of how iconic it has become so quickly. Looking at some of my past winners or past nominees over the past few years, I was almost half tempted to include his work on Wonder Woman 1984, just given how much he kind of saves that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I often wonder, would I have been higher on that movie if not for that score? And I don't know. I think he kind of carries that movie. I think he may have saved a sinking ship there, but that just goes to show how great of a composer that he is, that he's able to do that.
He's really good. I mean, earlier in the show, I briefly talked about Dark Phoenix, and I will still talk about the writing of that film, but Hans Zimmer's score is also a big element as to why I think I responded to that film the way that I did. Even in films that aren't received all that great, it feels like he always brings something to the table. That's what we're talking about.
I think he's incapable of doing bad work.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Like that awful movie with Colin Farrell in 2013. What was the name of that movie?
Oh, is that A Winter's Tale or something?
A Winter's Tale. One of the worst theater experiences
is that the one
I've ever had in my life.
Is that the movie where Will Smith plays the devil or something like that? Oh gosh,
weird
I forgot
cameo.
about that.
Weird cameo. And yet, I still remember that score, that Hans Zimmer score. Again, it's a part of my ever-growing Spotify playlist. And every now and then it comes on, and it's really good. Like that score on its own terms, you listen to it outside of the context of that movie, and you're like, man, live, this is gorgeous. It is an utter shame. It should be a crime. Someone should be thrown in jail that a score that good was used in such a bad movie.
True.
Like it's crazy. Like, yeah, so he always brings it. But I think his work in Dune is special. I think it's really, really great.
I think it's really good as well.
Okay. Number 4. What do you got?
Number 4. We might have some crossover here, and that's only because this movie is somewhere in your background right now. My number 4 is Dan Romer for Luca.
Guess what my number 4 is?
Dan Romer for Luca.
Dan Romer for Luca, baby. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Probably my pick for the most tear-inducing score of the decade for me, and among the most memorable. Like if I go about my day and I find myself just randomly humming a film score, that's how you know it's great for many reasons, but that's a great reason for it. Dan Romer's work in Luca is one I do often find myself humming, sometimes for no reason, just because the melody gets in my head. One of that main motif, whether it be in the opening credits or how it reoccurs in the ending when that great line, "You got me off the island, Luca," is uttered. Really quite great. It's also one of the decade's best scores for me in establishing a sense of place. We talked about that a lot with Hans Zimmer and Dune, and how he incorporated some new things that felt very tribal, that fit the world of Arrakis very well. And I think Dan Romer's work in Luca is doing something very similar, as it fits the film's Italian Riviera so perfectly, while also playing homage to some of the musical stylings of even Studio Ghibli. It's doing all of those things, and yet it also sounds like its own unique thing. It doesn't feel like it's just homage. It feels very much in keeping of what Dan Romer's work normally does. And if you listen to his film scores over the years, it still feels very much like a Dan Romer score. But I think for all of those reasons and just how instantaneously memorable its melody is, that's a big reason why it stuck for me. So yeah, Luca, great stuff. I want to hear what you have to say about it.
Oh my gosh. When I mentioned earlier that I was walking around my house crying tears, this was one of them. this is one of them. I love Dan Romer. I think he is one of the more underrated composers right now. I don't know if he gets talked about enough. I think he does really, really great work. And what he does in Luca is some of the most intimate, poignant work we've seen from Disney Pixar in quite some time. There is a warmth to that score. There's a great energy and vibrancy to it early on, especially. And again, I don't think I can fully articulate the musicality around it, not nearly as much as you do, but there's something about these rhythms that he injects into that score. Sometimes they come off whistly is the only way I can describe it.
I mean, like when the opening credits are happening and that main melody comes up, I think it's an oboe that's pulling that off.
Okay.
Instead of something like a clarinet or a flute or a more traditional woodwind instrument. And of course, an oboe is still a very traditional woodwind instrument, but it has a very unique sound. Like it almost sounds like
very unique.
It almost sounds like if a flute and an accordion somehow mesh together. It just kind of has that very whistly sound that you're talking about.
It's so good. Yeah. Whatever the instrument is, it is perfect for this film. And it creates a whimsy that I think is really fantastic. And then when the film gets emotional, there are these evocative tones that he brings to the strings that are just absolutely spellbinding to me. There's one track in particular, and it is a good thing that we cannot play the music here because YouTube would take down the whole podcast.
True.
Because if we played it here and I had to listen to it, I wouldn't be able to talk. I would be done. The one track that I especially love is the final one on the soundtrack. It's just titled "Go Find Out for Me," and it is unbelievable, the emotion that it pulls out, and it's simple yet so mesmerizing how it complements those final images when you have those two central characters talking and you come to find out that they're not going to be going to the same school. One of them is staying behind, and you just get this exchange between these two friends that have bonded so closely as they have throughout the film. And as they leave, there's just buildup of music. And as the train goes, and I forget the character's name. What are the characters' names?
Luca and Alberto.
Alberto, thank you.
Yeah.
So as Luca is leaving, Alberto just kind of cheers for him. And that's when he screams, "Go find out for me." And those horns kick in. I think they're French horns. When they kick in, oh my God, I fall on the floor. Like I can't handle it. I cannot handle it. It takes me to a new world. I love it. This was my favorite score and the year that it came out. What was this? 2021?
2021.
2021.
Yeah.
Which that was the same year the first Dune came out. But I had this as my winner over Hans Zimmer's Dune. That's how much I love this score.
That was a great year for scores because you also had Daniel Hart for The Green Knight, Johnny Greenwood for Power of the Dog, Carter Burwell for Tragedy of Macbeth, a few others that I'm probably forgetting, but yeah, great year for scores.
Yeah, Johnny Greenwood for Spencer came out that year.
Okay,
I'm a huge fan of the Desner's work in Cyrano.
That's a good one.
Yeah, there were some great scores to come out that year for sure. But Luca, as much as I love Hans Zimmer and Dune, and I just waxed poetic about that. I love Luca.
Well, 2021 shaping up to be a good year as far as, representation on these shows so far.
Mm-hmm. And I will say I have this at number 4, and maybe thank God I did, because it worked out nicely since you had it at number 4. But I will say my 2, 3, and 4, my number 1, like you, I think is like fairly my number 1. 2 and 3 and 4 could interchangeable. They all move me in very similar ways for reasons I'll get to here in a little bit. But yeah, those are pretty interchangeable. I love it a lot. So
let's see how much more crossover we have.
I have it here at number 4. All right. Since we both had that at 4, we'll quickly move on to 3. Then what do you have at number 3?
I don't think this one will be in your top 10. I'm sure this will be an honorable mention for you in some way. But my number 3 is Michael Abels' work for Jordan Peele's Nope.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff.
And for some context for our 2022 awards, I did nominate Michael Abels, but I did not give him the win then. I originally gave the win to Volker Bertelmann. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right, for All Quiet on the Western Front. And it is still a score I love. I'm not knocking that score or anything like that, but I would now give the edge to Michael Abels primarily because of how much it functions as kind of an exploration in genre spectacle. And that's fitting because that's exactly the theme of the movie. So it does have a thematically fitting component to it. Probably the most surprising thing about the film for me when I first went to see it was how in its final act, it basically turns into a glorified classic Western. And much of that is accomplished because of Michael Abels. The movie and the score specifically works as a very convincing Western score. It's also a very successful horror score. It also can support a great drama, also has some kind of funny comedic touches as well, which is very commonplace for a Jordan Peele film. It's doing so much without feeling like it's doing so much. And I think that's why I have it so high here for me. I think the run that happens, OJ's run that really serves as like the climactic battle of sorts, and the way that score swells is one of my favorite score tracks of the decade as well. But I think the way that the score just feels like sort of an embodiment of all types of genre spectacles that we've seen over the few decades, that's what makes it a good one. Because I think that's so fitting for the movie as well, given what it's trying to say about spectacle and how obsessed we are with it. So I found that very fitting. Really great stuff. I love the score quite a bit.
Yeah, I do really like this score. I will admit it's one that I haven't listened to as much as others.
Sure.
Honestly, the score from Jordan Peele's movies that I listen to often is his work from Us. That one I still listen to quite often. Not to downplay Abel's
No,
work on
that's a
Nope.
more innovative score in some ways, though. And I may have actually given that one the edge had it, come out this decade, but that was 2019.
Yeah, I love how experimental and innovative that score is. But what Abels does on Nope, I do think is really effective. I think perhaps partially why the score for me hasn't been as top of mind as some of these others is because when I think about that film, I immediately go to Jordan Peele's direction and how visceral it is.
Yeah.
And its spectacle and how Jordan Peele uses spectacle to do something so intimate and
kind of deconstructionistic in a way.
So like I tend to think about the film from that prism, less so what it's doing musically, but I do really like it. Certainly have fond memories of it, of the little I can recall. I just haven't listened to it as much as some of these others.
Yeah, and when I went back and watched the movie a second time, I really paid attention to the music because I really sensed how much it was working in parallel with what Jordan Peele was doing as a filmmaker in deconstructing that idea of genre spectacle, because it's a movie that successfully has it both ways. It's deconstructing exactly what it's participating in simultaneously. And a lot of that is because of how Michael Abels' score is playing into those tropes and doing it very well. So it's able to have it both ways. And that's the thing I latched onto, which is why I think the score is so fitting for this particular film.
Yeah. Really good stuff. I will say though, we're going to be doing some VIP bonus content here pretty soon where we talk about our top 10 lists for each of these years that we're talking about in this exercise. Nope will be a part of that conversation for me.
That's cool.
Just going to throw that out there.
That's cool.
Nope will be a part of that conversation. All right. For my number 3, we're sticking to the same year. So we're not moving too far in terms of the timeline here. My number 2 was my winner for its year, and that is Asuka Matsumiya. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Forgive me, but her work for After Yang is my number.
Should have guessed. It's also in your background right there.
Yeah, it's also right there as well. And look, it's funny because I had that up last week because we talked about Colin Farrell and his performance for After Yang and the Banshees of Inisherin.
Yeah, you had no reason to take it down.
I had no reason to take it down. Exactly. So we're here to talk about After Yang once again. If I couldn't champion that film enough with Colin Farrell's performance.
You haven't convinced me yet. I think you secretly hate this movie.
We need to talk about it further. Okay. We got to talk about this film further.
We need to talk about Bruno.
Look, I want people to go and watch this film. If you have not seen After Yang, you have to be patient with it. It is meditative. It is contemplative. It is still, as I talked about last week with Colin Farrell's performance, it's a very understated performance, which is why even outside of awards politics and campaigning and financials and all of that, After Yang never had the financials for an Oscar campaign.
Right.
But even all of that aside, I still understand why his performance in the Banshees of Inisherin was the one people gravitated toward. It is a little showier, admittedly. So After Yang, you have to be patient, but it's introspective, does render some of the best moments of that year. Please, please go watch that film. Check out the great performance there from Colin Farrell, and also stick around for the score here from Matsumiya. It is astounding. To articulate how much this score moves me, I want to tell a story. And I did.
Okay, I love this.
I did tell this story for the InSession Film Awards a few years ago, but it's been a while. We may have some new listeners. And even if you did listen to that show, you might not remember this. But when this film came out, it was later on in the year. Okay. So this is Thanksgiving of 2023. I am immobile because I had just had my second knee surgery, major knee surgery. Thanks, hockey. So I cannot move. I have my leg propped up. I am sitting. I cannot move. And I am fresh off knee surgery. So it's not like I can just pick up myself, grab my crutches, and walk around in a brace. It's not that. I am fresh off this surgery. My leg is immobile. I cannot go anywhere. And that is important to this story. So we do our dinner. We eat. I am stuck. The kids are off playing. All the other adults are chasing the kids around. So I do find myself, and I'm at my in-laws, by the way. I'm at my in-laws, but it's Thanksgiving. So there is, of course, a bunch of people there. And because I'm just sitting there by myself, I decide to listen to music and chill out for a moment. We had just eaten, so you got that gluttonous feeling where you're just sitting there and feeling miserable.
That feeling of letting everything digest with some headphones in. It's a pretty nice feeling. I agree.
It's a great feeling. And I'm at first listening to my film score playlist, which has at this point like 6,000 tracks on it. So it's just bouncing around. And then I come to the score for After Yang. It had been a few months since I have seen After Yang. We had a great conversation here on the show talking about that movie. And that music starts playing. And there is this remarkable piano motif that you hear throughout that film that just wonderfully evokes that film's pathos and its sensory on grief. it's incredible how, like, the piano has to be one of the best instruments humankind ever invented. It can do so much.
Sure. Yeah.
I love it. I could listen to someone play the piano all day. And I think one of my favorite qualities is that you don't, like, you can listen to something that is incredibly sophisticated and you can be moved by that or find it invigorating in all of these ways. But you can also just listen to someone play a couple of notes and you have to cancel your plans for the rest of the day because it just wafts over you and leaves you devastated. And that is kind of...
Yeah, I love music that can do that.
That is kind of what the score does. So I'm at Thanksgiving, I'm listening to this score, and I am undone. And I'm not just like crying
How
tears.
embarrassing for you.
I am uncontrollably sobbing. And I start listening to the whole score. Like, forget the one track that I was listening to. I just decided in that moment, I'm just gonna be in this moment, regardless of the context of the circumstances I find myself in.
That's how you know you love it, when you're just not going to fight the reaction. You're just going to let it waft. And you're just going to let yourself fall into it.
Exactly. That's 100% what happened. So I listened to the whole thing and I am uncontrollably sobbing. At any moment, family, friends, anyone could have walked into the room where I was and I would have had to very uncomfortably explain what was happening. And I don't know what would have happened if I had to do that. But thankfully that didn't come to pass. No one interrupted my little session. I could just be in the moment. But in hindsight and context, it's really funny to think about that moment because easily someone could have walked into the living room where I was. I wasn't hidden in a bedroom. I was in the main living room. Someone could have easily walked in.
What's this guy doing?
What is going on here? Did someone die? Like I was undone, but I just wanted to feel it. I just wanted to feel it, and I love it. There's such a beauty and a power to that film. And again, it's a film about memory and identity and grief and the quiet beauty of connection. And those melodies, those piano motifs stunningly tap into that in this quiet but profound way.
Well, yeah.
That, again, I don't know if I'm doing it justice. I'm telling a fun little story here, but I just urge people to go and listen to it if you haven't already. It is incredible.
Yeah. I think by telling this story in this way, you are articulating how this score also works so well on its own and doesn't just need to be enjoyed within the context of the film. Obviously, you have that emotional reaction because of how much you love the film, so you have something to compare it with. But there is still something very ethereal and very heavenly about it, as if the motif itself is meant to suggest some type of afterlife in a way, or at least some type of memory bank of sorts. And great music is able to create some type of visual, some visual pair with something else, even if it doesn't necessarily have that literal visual to compare it with. And I think the music on its own is able to it's able to paint a picture. It's able to do that very well.
It's really, really good. And something you said there that I think is really important is that I loved the film.
Yeah.
Because this could have easily have been a Winter's Tale situation. I don't know if I would have gone for it as far as best of the decade if that was the case. But you can like scores, love scores from films you don't really like. But that is a big part of it. I loved that film. Its melancholy did quite the number on me. Its themes on grief, again, the performance from Colin Farrell, the visuals of the film, Yang as a character. There's something so stirring about that film that I do find profound, which is why it was one of my I think it was in my top 5 of that year or top 6 or so. It was high on my list.
High. Yeah, it was high.
Maybe 7. It was in my top 10. I really, really loved it. So yes, when I'm sitting there at Thanksgiving listening to the score, the music is great, but it is the connection to the film that takes it to a whole new stratosphere. Like those two things working together. And going back to us talking about the criteria, like that is kind of the big thing here, right? It's these movies that are really great, or score working in the context of the film and how it just, complements that film impeccably. That is After Yang.
And it's interesting, because this is a composer that really hasn't worked that much in film.
Yeah.
In a way,
Yeah.
I think After Yang might be her most, I guess, like big budget movie that she's worked on yet. That's saying something.
Yeah, I know. It's not a name that anyone really knows all that much.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's done a few other shorts.
She did do the score for that documentary that we reviewed way back in the old days of Extra Film. Remember the Wolf Pack?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she apparently did the score for that.
Okay. Yeah. So a little thing, some TV stuff.
Well, Skate Kitchen had a
well.
bit of an audience, so and she did that as well.
Yeah. So certainly done some things, but like, yeah, I mean, this might be another one of those situations, and I don't know her as a person or her musical ambitions, but I love that score so much that I might put her in that Jeff Nichols, Kelly Reichardt camp of, if I was a billionaire, I would just want to fund more projects, like put her in more movies, please. Jeff Nichols, I will give you all the money in the world to make whatever I just have one request. I just have one request as a composer. I want this name attached to the project. That's all. Like one of those situations.
Yeah, make it happen. Let's fund it.
Yeah, exactly.
All the proceeds for this episode go to funding her career.
Exactly. Anyway, After Yang, great movie. Scores on Spotify. Go check it out. It's great. My number 3.
All right.
Okay. Number 2. What do you got at number 2?
Number 2. I wouldn't be surprised if this is also your number 2 or even number 1, but we'll see. I'm not sure where you have this one. My number 2 is Joe Hisaishi for The Boy and the Heron, Hayao Miyazaki's film.
Okay. I have this in my 10. This is in my
Okay, it's in your 10. All right. That's cool to see. Really great stuff here. And the fact that he wasn't nominated at the Oscars yet again for his great work is kind of a sin. I think why this score works so well for me kind of goes in hand with a lot of what you were saying earlier with After Yang, and specifically that piano motif and what kind of emotion it conveys just on its own. But again, comparing it to the film itself that it supports, it adds another emotional layer to it. This film, The Boy and the Heron, was kind of being touted as possibly Miyazaki's final film, which is a weird thing to say because I feel like he says that about every film he makes, really. But with The Boy and the Heron, it really felt like it could be his final film. That felt very truthful in some ways because it is a film all about Miyazaki's own legacy and the influence his work will have on future generations. So as a result, the score here from Joe Hisaishi almost sounds like a eulogy in some ways. And I think that's very fitting, given that this is a movie that's not just about Miyazaki's own legacy, but it's a movie that's also about mourning the loss of a parent. So it's again, one of those things where I think the piano motif itself kind of gives off this almost church-like beauty of what it means to celebrate life and death, and then life once again. But I think also feels very thematically in keeping with Miyazaki himself and the story he's telling to support his own legacy. It's one of those cases where the musical score just feels so intertwined with everything that the movie's doing, which is a great criteria for me, as I've talked about earlier. And I think for those reasons, it is quite beautiful. And again, bit of a bias pick. I wanted to represent Joe Hisaishi in some way. And I guess it's kind of a nice transition here, right, JD? Because he will be working with Kogonada later this year.
I was just about to say, that is an incredible pairing. Kogonada, of course, directing After Yang, and his new film coming out later this year will be scored by Joe Hisaishi. And that's an insane combo that I didn't even know was possible. Like, that's awesome.
That's the only
I
reason
cannot
why I'm
wait.
excited. I mean, there's many reasons why I'm excited for that movie. But honestly, Joe
Yeah.
Hisaishi coming to work with Kogonada is probably number
Yeah.
one on that list for me.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
yeah.
I know the trailer got mixed reactions. I don't really care, to be perfectly honest. It's Kogonada.
I'm
It's
there.
an interesting cast and a composer that I didn't even know was possible for that film. Are you kidding me? That's enough. I'm sorry.
That's enough. I
for
don't
me.
need a trailer. I actually
Yeah.
tweeted this out. I thought the trailer was really bad, but it doesn't change my feelings on my excitement for the movie. I'm really looking forward to this
Yeah.
movie because of this
Yeah.
talent involved and who's actually working on it. And I wish the trailer capitalized on that a little bit more as opposed to
Yeah.
whatever pop song was playing in the background.
I will also say this, and sorry to get down this rabbit hole,
Sure.
but you and I have seen Kogonada's films. Many
Mhm.
of our listeners have seen Kogonada's films.
We know what to expect.
That trailer is not at all what I associate Kogonada with.
I'm
That
with
to
you.
me
Yeah.
smells of a marketing company desperate to sell that film
Yeah.
and is trying to sell something that doesn't exist.
I'm completely with you.
That's how I feel about it. At any rate, that is to say, I agree with you about this pick. The Boy and the Heron, fantastic. It's in my 6 through 10.
Cool.
I don't know if I have anything else to add to what you were saying. I love the piano motifs. It's very inviting. It's certainly very Joe Hisaishi. And I think it works so well with the strings when those suddenly appear as well. There's something so innocent and serene about his work generally, but especially in this film that, and I can't really recall you articulating it this way when we did the review. Maybe you did. It's been obviously a year or so since we've talked about that movie, but that it almost acting as a eulogy of sorts, I think is really appropriate given the musicality to that film. We'll see with Hayao Miyazaki. He's unpredictable, and I love that about him, I guess.
You know, I will always be first in line to see a new film from Hayao Miyazaki. But if this ends up being his final film, I think in a way I might prefer that because it does feel like it's meant to be a final statement specifically. Like it almost feels like this was made with him knowing it's probably going to be his final film.
Yeah. I mean, certainly The Wind Rises had that feel in some ways, but you are right that The Boy and the Heron being this Miyazaki buffet of sorts, it does feel as if this was him wanting to tap into his career in a reflective way, that it feels very appropriate that this is his last movie, if that's indeed what happens. But I maybe I speak selfishly when I say that I kind of want that to be the case, but to your point, if he makes a new movie, we're there day one.
Of course, we're going to be there. Yeah, so I guess that makes us hypocrites, but
very
we'll
much
be
so.
there.
But there is something just so, I don't know, emotional about that.
There's something so conclusive about this
conclusive,
movie.
Yeah. I really love it, and I think the score perfectly complements that.
And I felt that way pretty immediately. You know, that piano motif that reoccurs throughout most of the movie really serves as the main theme. It pops up very early in the movie when the title card appears. And when I first heard that, my first reaction was, oh, this sounds like the end. And speaking of Miyazaki and his, directorial efforts, the music itself gave me that feeling like this is the end, isn't it? And again, whether it ends up being that or not is beside the point. But the fact that the music conveys what the thematic crutch of the movie kind of is, I think is really telling.
No, I agree. No, I agree. It's fantastic stuff. I love it. Like I said, a good honorable mention for me. All right, my number 2, Brendan. I could use a boost.
I should have guessed that this was going to be in here. I should have guessed this was going to be in your top 5.
The Wild Robot, Chris Bowers. All right, another story. This one
All
involves
right.
my youngest Andrew.
Let's see if JD tears start flowing with this one.
This one, admittedly, might be a little harder to tell. I can laugh at the Thanksgiving one. This one involves my youngest Andrew. And I think I've noted on the show before that I got the record for that score. And part of my Christmas gift last year, my wife, because I got that record and she knew how much I loved that film and that score. So for Christmas, she got me a record player. I had never had one before. I have all these film scores and I had nothing to play them on for years. And so she got me one for Christmas.
It's so nice.
And that is, of course, the first one I played. And not only was that the first score that I played on there, that track, I Could Use a Boost, was the first track that I immediately went to, of course. But again, to articulate this, and I'm sure some of our listeners remember me going on and on about this last year.
Yeah, and kind of bawling your eyes out a little bit.
But, and this actually happened. This has happened a couple of times, even somewhat recently, like a month ago, it happened again. But I'll never forget the first time I put this on, and my youngest Andrew, who wasn't quite 2 at the time.
Okay.
He does this thing where when he hears music playing, it doesn't matter what music it is, but he just kind of does this with his hands, where he just kind of gets excited that music is playing. Like that
kind of looks like he's conducting.
Kind of. He just kind of jumps up and kind of does this. So there's one day where I put that score on the record. Okay. And part of this is pragmatic, because when I go, like, he wants to touch the record player. Of course, he's 2, so he just wants to touch his hands on everything.
And then eventually put it in his mouth, right?
Exactly. So he was going to break something, scratch it, who knows. So as a way to keep his hands off of it, I picked him up and would just kind of swing him back and forth and let him kind of dance as the music played. And this is another one of those moments where I'm glad no one else was around, because I would, people would just see me sobbing. But like, so that score kicks in, excuse me. And I pick him up and I'm holding him as that melody starts to kick in. And similar to what we were just talking about with After Yang, and certainly some of these other scores we've talked about, you remember the movie and you remember that scene in particular. That was one of my scenes of that year.
Sure. Yeah.
It was, I think, number 2, just behind Red Rooms, if I'm not mistaken.
How have you not made a t-shirt with I Could Use a Boost yet?
I don't know. Honestly, that's a good question. It is. That is a really good question. I need to get on that. But
you're welcome for the inspiration.
Yeah, it's one of my scenes of the year, so I know it intimately. In fact, one of my favorite things that I've loved doing over the last 6 months since that film came out is watching people react to that on YouTube and TikTok.
Oh yeah, you found the reaction epidemic on YouTube.
It was so good. Like I typically am not involved in that scene at all.
Yeah, neither am I.
That film, because it is a movie that does surprise you in that way. Because oftentimes you get those really heavy emotional moments at the end of a movie. The Wild Robot does it at the midway point. So it might not be something that you see coming. And so knowing that, it's fun to watch people go into it not expecting it. And then when it comes, you're like, it blows them away. So like watching that on YouTube has been fun. And even most recently, my wife sent me a TikTok like last week where there was a couple on a plane. They were watching it on a plane and they're like, oh, we're going to watch this movie. Ha ha ha. And then it cuts to halfway through and they're just both undone. It's
the best. Not embarrassing for them at all.
No, exactly. They're on a plane. Everyone's around them. I love
if
it.
If that's the setting to cry, then that's the time to do it, because I guess the excuse is, if they don't want people to know that they're crying at a movie, just say, I'm scared of flying.
There you go. Yeah. You can make up excuses on a plane for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But I love that trend. But anyway, I pick up Andrew, that song kicks in, and of course you associate it with that moment, Roz having to say goodbye. There's a little bit of an awkward exchange, but they take off, and then she runs up that mountain and has like that midnight special moment. At least that's what I've been calling it. And you get that close up on her as she gets that one last glimpse. And like that is running vividly in my mind as I'm holding my youngest and that score is playing on this record player. I don't know if I can describe the emotions.
You basically became your own world's version of Roz, right?
Yeah, like I completely lost it. Like there is something about those melodies, the emotional anchors that Chris Bowers builds into that score, and the string arrangements are just impeccable. It is really, really, really great stuff. I love that film deeply. That score hits me every single time. Even I've listened to it 100 times, and still today, as I'm listening to it, same with Luca, same with After Yang, and it's like, my God, I don't know. There's
it's kind of rare for DreamWorks Animation to go that hard, whether it be with the Wild Robot or the How to Train Your Dragon movies. Rarely do they go that hard, but when they do, there's something kind of unique about how they tap into a certain emotionality. That's actually not really like Pixar, even if people want to try to compare it to that. It has its own vibe, and I hope they do that more often as opposed to just doing the Kung Fu Pandas of the world, which are fun.
I agree.
They're certainly fun. I like those movies, and I think they should keep making them every now and then. But I do want to see DreamWorks tap into this emotional vibe that feels kind of unique for animation going forward.
Yeah.
I would like to see that.
Yeah. And I do want to know, I mean, I'm obviously talking about the emotional beats of that film, but the Wild Robot also has these incredible like bursts of energy to them, whether that be Roz in the forest as she's trying to navigate this new world early on, or trying to save all the animals in the back half of the film. And those moments have an incredible energy to them that is reflective in the score as well. So like I love the fun vibrancy that Chris Bowers
There's
also
levity. Yeah,
builds.
there's a variety
levity.
here for sure.
There's an incredible and the other thing too is like how it complements the sound design, because the sound design is so pivotal to that film, and the lighting of Roz and the visuals there, the sounds, like all of that is like there's so much visual storytelling happening in that film that the score has to help elevate, which it does. And so it's not always the emotional beats of the score. It's everything that I really, really love, which is a big reason I have it here at number 2. But yeah, those emotional beats certainly are the first thing that come to mind.
Absolutely.
Especially that moment halfway through. But and again, I can't say enough good things about that main theme. It is striking. And Chris Bowers has been on some podcasts talking about it, about how he arrived at that. I urge everyone to go and check out. It's really, really great. I love it.
Great year for film scores that it came out.
Absolutely.
Some of these we'll talk about in honorable mentions that I had to compete with, but that was a great year for Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross for 2 movies that I'm sure we'll highlight later on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We're going a little long here, so let's go ahead and move on. Number 1, what do you got?
Number 1, Conclave.
As everyone predicted, yeah.
No, I mean, of course, JD, come on. This whole conversation, this whole topic begins and ends with Ludwig Göransson's work for Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer.
Yeah. My number 1.
Yep. I knew we were going to cross over on this one. There was no chance it going any other way.
Yeah.
I think it's a score that should be studied. I think at the very least, it'll be looked at in the same way that we look at the best movements by classical composers. When I first heard that piece, Can You Hear the Music in the film? I seriously thought it was a Mozart needle drop or something. But it's not. It's an original composition. And I feel like that's maybe the highest compliment one can give to any film score, as it proves just how melodically it's operating in such a way that most scores just don't ever get to. I think that's wonderful stuff. It's just one of those scores that syncs so perfectly with the film it's in. I can't imagine it sounding any other way, nor can I imagine the film without it. It's so synonymous with Oppenheimer. And I think we often talk about that. How does a score fit within the world of the film that it's serving. And I think this is a case of maybe the best example of this decade
Mm-hmm.
of a score functioning within the movie and basically being such a great partnership with that, because it
Yeah.
is basically the way the movie moves. It's not just the
Yeah.
editing and the way that it intertwines between different narratives and things like that. The way this score is composed is why the movie is the way it is. I mean, to the point
Yeah.
you can almost say Ludwig Göransson is like a co-director on this movie. That's how crucial the score is, and we had to talk about it. There's no other choice here, I think.
Yeah. This is going to sound like a very bizarre comparison at first, but the film that comes to mind when I think about the music here is Mad Max Fury Road.
I can
And
see that.
the
Yeah.
reason I say that is because Fury Road has this concoction where on one hand it is a rock album that burst with this astounding energy.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yet inside of those rhythms is this gorgeous, poignant, moving motif that somehow works simultaneously with its rock energies. I don't know how Junkie XL did it. It is like at once the most rock album you've ever heard and also some of the most moving film score you've ever heard at the same time.
Yeah.
It
He
is-
must have
it-
been listening to a lot of like symphonic progressive metal or something like that, which
Yeah.
actually does do both of those things. He must have been listening to
Yeah.
a lot of, I don't know, like a lot of Dream Theater or Opeth or
It's
something
crazy.
like that.
It's crazy. And the reason I bring that up is because I think Göransson is doing similar things with Oppenheimer in the sense
Sure.
that at the same time, it is cerebral, it is ethereal, it's overwhelming, it is terrifying, but it also has this emotional underbelly that is really hard to pinpoint. But I just love how the film is able to do all of those things at once. Like the only word that comes to mind to me is it's transcendent.
It really
As
is.
cliche as that is to sound, but like
It's yeah. Yeah,
this,
it is.
it almost feels like it has its own language to it, and it feels atomic appropriately. It feels like it is on the verge of splitting apart. And I love how it is all of these things at once. It is terrifying and cerebral, and powerful, but there's also this kind of looming tension, this emotion that's ready to burst at any moment, which is obviously appropriate given what the film is.
Yeah.
And so it's incredible. It's just really, really remarkable how Göransson is able to weave all of that together. I love it. Best score of
It's
the
great.
decade.
It's great.
Yeah.
The vibe that it creates is just so unique. I've never seen or even heard anything like that. You're right. It's transcendent. It's not just transcendent because we haven't heard anything like that, but it turns the movie into something else that it wouldn't otherwise be without this score. There are moments where this feels like even more of a sci-fi film than Interstellar ever was. And a lot of that is because of some of the musical components happening here to back it up. It's really well done. Really well done.
Oh, it's so good. So good. Absolutely love it. I'm with you. Göransson, Oppenheimer, the easy choice here for best score of the decade so far. All right, honorable mentions. What do you got?
So I did mention Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who had a great decade, also a great year in 2024, I guess that was. The one I'm picking is Queer. Their work for Luca Guadagnino is Queer, and I know a lot of people would also cite Challengers, great stuff there, but I think I think both are great, but I tend to prefer the melancholy of Queer. So that would be my number 6. My number 7, probably Daniel Pemberton for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Okay. Yeah.
Number 8, William Tyler for Kelly Reichardt's First Cow.
That's an inspired pick. I love that.
Just the way the guitar strings reverberate during those opening credit sequences and the way it carries through much of it's a very minimal score. So it felt hard picking this for a top 5 in the end, but I love the aesthetic choices it makes to fit the world that Kelly Reichardt's giving us there. So that would be my number 8. My number 9, probably the work from Monster, the Hirokazu Koreeda film, specifically the work of Ryuichi Sakamoto, I think is really quite great. And then to round out a number 10 here, probably Daniel Blumberg for The Brutalist. I didn't love The Brutalist as much as most others, even though I do recognize it's a very good movie. But that score kind of functions in a similar way to Ludwig Göransson's work in Oppenheimer. Almost feels like a classical piece, like it will be compared to that kind of movement and that kind of style. So if I had to do a top 10 here, that would probably be it.
Yeah, I love all those picks. I certainly have them on my list as far as honorable mentions go. As far as my 6 through 10, so at number 6, I would have. I'm probably going to go with The Boy and the Heron, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
At number 7, this is a bit of a shock even to me because I don't know if I would have had this here if you asked me, maybe even at the beginning of the year. But it's a score I cannot get away from, and it's similar to what I talked about with The Wild Robot after Yang Luca, in the sense that there are elements here that just deeply move me. But it's a little bit closer to The Wild Robot in the sense that when the energy and the action is there, it's doing great things on its own terms.
Sure.
But my God, those poignant melodies kill me. And that is Simon Franklin for The Way of Water. I have
Interesting.
I love that score. I love
it's a good score, and I was worried about that, knowing that I guess it was James Horner that didn't come back for it, obviously.
Yes. Obviously, he didn't come back, and I love Horner's work on that original film. I don't love that first Avatar like others might, but I do think the score is excellent. I think the score is one of the most memorable parts of that first Avatar. And man, I think Franklin, he utilizes those themes well, but the new themes he creates, I think, are equally astounding, especially those emotional beats.
It makes it all that more emotional when he does call back to James Horner's original themes. Like it almost feels like a tribute to his work, who we obviously lost too soon. So in a way, it makes the score almost feel like a eulogy once again. I guess that's the theme of this whole conversation. Scores that feel almost like eulogies are going to work for us every time.
Well, I mean, and it's not even just that it feels that way. It is, there are elements of it that becomes a literal eulogy.
Yeah.
Because there's this poem that plays throughout the film that ultimately comes to this tragic end at, when we get to that final act.
Yeah.
And the way, like the musical melodies, which are new for this film, that he creates for that water poem that we hear throughout the film is stunningly gorgeous. It's so good. I think it is up there with I Could Use a Boost as far as emotional beats go. It's really great. So anyway, that's my number 7.
He is coming back for Fire and Ash as well,
which I'm really looking forward to. Okay, my number 8 is my winner for the year 2020. And I love this, but the reason I didn't go with this in my top 5 is because I already had a Dan Romer pick in my top 5.
Oh, is this for Wendy?
This is for Wendy. Wendy
thought about that too.
Dan Romer and Ben Zeitlin's work for Wendy. And again, it's one of those, the film isn't great. I like it, but it's not the greatest film in the world. But
Sure.
My God, that score goes so hard. It is so good. I love it.
Yeah.
And I don't regret that pick at all. Like that is still my favorite score from 2020. But I think on this list, I had Dan Romer up there already. I was going to let others shine there.
Yeah.
So I have that here at number 8. Number 9, I have Across the Spider-Verse. And then at number 10, I have Babylon. The great Babylon.
That's
that everyone loves and raves about. But yeah, there's
that
a
is
million
still
others.
my favorite Damien Chazelle film.
Really, really good film. Just to throw out a few others, though, The Fabelmans, I really love. Furiosa is really great. You mentioned Queer and the Brutalist. I have that on here as well.
Yeah.
The Northman, 9 Days, another little indie film that's fantastic. May December If you can qualify that as original, I don't know if you can, but it's still
That's
great.
hard. That's hard. Yeah.
Pinocchio, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio.
Yeah. Make that
Cyrano.
distinction. Not Disney's live action remake,
Yes.
quote unquote, directed by Robert Zemeckis.
Exactly. The Zone of Interest, which is somehow still not on Spotify. I don't know how.
It's just
Love
weird.
that. Challengers. Flow, the animated film Flow.
Okay.
There's a lot. I could go on and on. I'll leave it there for now, but good stuff. It's been a good decade.
Movie
for
music.
scores.
Movie music is good.
It's good. Good stuff. All right. With that, we'll go ahead and wind down here as we've gone a little long. I've had too much fun talking about film music and how they've obliterated my life in good
it's all
ways, ways that I love. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say, you can leave a comment below. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can always email us at InSessionFilm at gmail.com. All right. As I noted earlier, we have 3 reviews coming out this week. We got Ballerina, Megan Kearns, Max Vincent. They will be doing that review. Brendan and I will tackle Wes Anderson, his latest The Phonician Scheme, and Ephus. We will handle those 2 movies. New Women in Session at the end of the week. And then next week, 641, best movies of the decade. So be on the lookout for that. Okay, Brennan, anything else before we get out of here? Did I forget anything?
I don't think you did. If anything, I'm kind of having a lot of fun going back through some of these films from the 2020s so far, seeing what's changed. We will have some bonus content in relation to some of our past top 10 lists to see if things have changed.
Yep.
And I'll just simply say right now, there are a few minor shifts, but some of them might seem like major shifts as we talk about it further. It just goes to show that when we publish these lists every year, they're never absolute. There's no such thing as absolute.
They
and
change
they change all the time.
Yeah.
And honestly, I've gotten to a point where it's like if I publish a list, I do it kind of half-assedly now, knowing that it's going to change. It's just what do I feel in the moment? I know it's not going to be this in like 10 years,
Yeah.
but that's what makes these fun.
That's a really great point because I do think 10 years ago, I would stress myself out wanting to perfect my top 10, which is hilarious in hindsight. And I do remember that I would go on walks or, as I was driving around, I would be thinking about, okay, what is my top 10 going to be? And I would very proactively, try to be as thoughtful as I could, which is so hilarious in hindsight because 5 years later, I'm just changing it anyway.
Well, yeah,
So-
because I think back in the day, we thought the exercise was all about, okay, let's pick our top 10, and the goal is that it would never change, right?
Yeah.
That's such a stupid goal.
Yeah. Very, very dumb. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they change all the time. All
Yeah.
the time.
If anything, it becomes more
So-
fascinating knowing that they will change and then seeing what those changes are. And then it becomes
Yeah.
even more fascinating if you look back at a year, 10 years later, it's like, wow, it didn't change at all. That's weird.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
I've even joked in recent months that I don't even keep a running list all that much. That the only stress for me now is that I have to put it together
Yeah.
when the time comes because I
It's
don't
work.
keep a running tally anymore. So that's how stress-free I am now when it comes to these lists.
Yeah. It allows you to still love movies and not turn
Yeah.
it into work.
Exactly. I enjoy doing those exercises, don't get me wrong. I have a lot of fun
Yeah.
with it, but I definitely don't stress about it the way that I used to. There's no doubt about that. So, all right.
Yeah.
Well, stay on the lookout for that. VIP bonus content coming down the pipeline. Patreon, patreon.com/InSessionFilm, Apple Podcast subscriptions or YouTube memberships. However you want to subscribe, you'll get access to that bonus content. Okay, with that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Film Scores. Film Score Junkie, actually.